Hi, my name is Zara Virani, and I am an instructor in Education and Development Services. This presentation focuses on how to teach worker travel using a cooperative learning method called Jigsaw. The objectives of this presentation is to identify the steps for implementing a Jigsaw activity using the worker travel module, to describe the 5 elements of cooperative learning, and finally to explain how the 5 elements of cooperative learning are incorporated in the Jigsaw activity and the skills that are gained by the students when using this with worker travel. Let's take a look at the steps for implementing the Jigsaw activity. Prior to implementing this activity in the classroom, there is some work that needs to be done beforehand. First, the lesson needs to be divided into segments. When looking at the worker travel module, the transportation portion of it would be divided into the segments of car, bus, plane, and taxi. Next, for each of the segments, the objectives or questions need to be identified. This helps the students that are in the groups to guide their research in mastering the material around the segment that they are working on. So, for example, if a student has the segment regarding car transportation, questions and objectives that we may want them to start considering to look at would be: what are the rules for paying mileage, what are the exceptions, additional expenses that are reimbursed when a car is used for transportation, and to create 2 examples of when mileage is paid. The third thing that needs to be done prior to implementing this activity in the classroom is to determine the roles required when working in groups. Will there be a timekeeper, a manager, to help ensure that everyone stays on task while they are working inside their group? Next, we have the layout of the lesson. In this step, the objectives of the lesson are explained to the students. They are advised of the materials and then the steps to carry out the activity. In the case of worker travel, the objectives would be to identify the elements of worker travel, identify the forms of transportation, explain the rules and exceptions for each form of transportation, explain how workers are reimbursed for their travel, and the materials that they can use to help support them in identifying the information that they need for their segment would be to use the West Procedures Manual and the Worker Travel module available on the TA team site. The next step is to create the Jigsaw group. So after identifying the number of students that you have in the class and the number of segments, you can then determine the number of groups. Each group, the number of students in each group should equal the number of segments that you have. In the case of worker travel, we're looking at 4 segments. So if we have 12 students in the class, then this means that we can have 3 groups of 4. Once the students are in their groups, they should review the objectives. This was part of the pre-lesson work that was done. This way they can decide which segment they would like to work on. As you can see from the diagram, in each of the 3 groups, the students have selected the segment they wish to work on. The next step in the process is to develop expertise. The students in the class regroup so that everyone working on the same segment is together. In this example, we see that everyone working on the segment regarding bus transportation is at one table, and the same is true for students working on the car, plane, and taxi segments. Once in the groups, the students should review the objectives to ensure that everybody has the same understanding of what is being asked. And then they can start reviewing the material on the worker travel page, the worker travel website, the West Procedures Manual, and also any applicable law and policy in terms of becoming experts in developing their knowledge with regards to worker travel and how it applies to their segments, and what may be asked in terms of reimbursing workers for their travel while on claim. In the process of developing their expertise and their knowledge, students should be thinking about questions that may be asked by workers, and also the questions that they may be asked by their classmates when they regroup with their original Jigsaw group. During this process, as students are reviewing the material, they should be encouraging and supporting one another in gathering the material and understanding it and applying it to everyday concepts. And at the same time, we may see that when applying law and policy or interpreting law and policy, that students may challenge or question the application. So, for example, with reimbursing mileage in car transportation, the rule is that mileage is only reimbursed when a person travels more than 48 kilometers round trip. A student may question what or how is a person reimbursed if there is no other form of transportation other than using a car and the total mileage is less than 48 kilometers. Are any exceptions to that? And this would be something that as a group that they would explore to find out if this particular rule is a set rule or are there any exceptions to this rule. While one of the main key objectives of being in the group and developing this knowledge and expertise is to really master the material, the other thing that the students need to be doing is thinking about how they are going to be presenting this material to their original Jigsaw group. As an instructor, it's important that each goal is visited to see if there is any questions or clarification that may be required, and just to ensure that the concepts are fully understood. In the next step, which is the fifth step in the process, the students return to their original Jigsaw groups to share their knowledge. Prior to sharing the knowledge, the students should have already determined the group role that they would like to play. So, for example, whether they would like to play the role of the leader, the timekeeper, the summarizer, etc. Once this is done, the students can begin to share the knowledge that they have gained with the rest of the group. Because the student that has only been working on the car segment only has that knowledge, that's the knowledge that they would share. But they won't have the knowledge about the other three components that are part of worker travel. Sharing the knowledge gives that person the knowledge regarding the other three components that are missing. This leads to an overall increase in individual and group knowledge. At this time, the role of the instructor would be to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to speak. A good way to ensure that there is still a good understanding of the concepts and the knowledge that's required is to first have, for example, everyone who worked on the car to discuss their knowledge with the rest of their group. And once the allotted time frame is over, is to do a check-in with the groups to see how the process went, what questions may have arisen that all the people that worked on the car transportation could answer. The last step is the assessment portion. And usually when we think of assessment, we think of a test or a quiz. In cooperative learning, while that is an accepted way to assess students, an alternative is that having all the students in one group complete an assignment, but then only marking one student's assignment. So for example, I often give a worker travel worksheet to all the students and ask them to apply all the laws and policy in the different problems, and then to take one of them, mark it, and then that grade would go to every student that was part of that particular group. This particular form of assessment really puts onus and responsibility on the students in each group to ensure that not only they have a full understanding of the segment that was assigned to them, but they also have a good understanding of the other segments that were presented as well. So there's a lot of responsibility and ownership on the group in itself. The other type of assessment that needs to take place is group assessment. And in this process, students should be discussing what went well in their group, what did not go well, what group functions would make them stronger and more efficient, and if there's any group behaviors that they feel that need to be eliminated. Next, we take a look at the 5 basic elements of cooperative learning. And in order to understand cooperative learning, we need to understand what is the purpose of it. And the purpose of cooperative learning is to make each member or each student a stronger individual. The 5 elements focus on making that purpose come true. The first element is a positive interaction or positive independence. It is the perception that each student in a group is linked to others in that group, and each student cannot succeed without the others. This leads to the essence of the sink or swim notion, which is that if they have mastered the material well together, they swim. If they haven't, as a group or a collective, they sink. The next one is individual accountability, where performance of each student is assessed by giving an individual test or quiz, or having each student explain what he or she has learned to a classmate, or with the instructor observing each and documenting the contributions of each member. The third element is promotive interaction, where students are helping and assisting and encouraging each other's efforts and contributions, and also challenging each other's comprehension and knowledge and application of law and policy. The next one is social skills. Just as academic skills are taught, social skills to work inside groups need to be taught, and students need to be given the opportunity to practice those skills. And lastly, we have group processing, where the group discusses how they did well and they celebrate their successes and their hard work. If we now look at these elements and we apply it to the steps inside the Jigsaw activity, when we look at the step on becoming experts or developing expertise, in this area, students have developed the skill of learning to use resources. They have learned to resolve conflict within their group, which may occur when they're challenging each other in terms of application of law and policy and its interpretations. They're learning to work together as a group and using those leadership skills and conflict resolution skills and communication skills. And this all comes from the 4 elements of positive interdependence, promotive interaction, social skills, and individual accountability. There's also that level of making sure that they understand all the information, because they not only need to understand it for themselves, but need to be able to communicate it to others, which comes to the next step, which is sharing the knowledge. So again, we see the same elements present, and again, the skills that the students are walking away with is the communication skills, the cognitive processing skills, taking the information and making sense of it and making it applicable, and then also the group interaction skills and working together as a group and working in a team. The last step that we see inside the cooperative learning process is assessment. And again, we see problem solving and communication skills coming as students work together on how to solve problems as part of their assessment. So in summary, cooperative learning creates a more interactive environment where students become responsible for their own and their peers' learning. It creates increased learning capacity of the students, as the students are responsible for their learning and explaining material and seeking information from others. Students also increase their cognitive processing skills, learn to work together in groups, and enhance their communication skills. Hopefully you can now see how this particular activity can be applied to any particular topic. Thank you.